title that I just called this today was Culture Club, more than a band. And there are probably a whole bunch of people on this call that are like, I didn't know there was a band named Culture Club. And for those of you, I'm sorry that you missed out on that because the 80s were the best for music, and that's all there is to it. So, also, are you seeing my face on that screen?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to move that so that we don't see that.
Well,
So
not on the
here,
screen. No, I see you in the list, like with everyone
no, no,
else.
no, but I just want to make sure you can see the actual slides themselves in
Yes.
their entirety.
Yep.
Great. So I've given this presentation a couple of times, and I've got what I think are a couple of simple goals for the day, and those are to really understand what organizational culture is, and not just what it is, but why it matters. And I would say at this point in my professional life, I've come to believe myself that culture is if not the most important thing, at the very top of the list for what matters in getting employee buy-in, achieving excellence in your organization for your professional advancement, everything else. And so I'm going to talk about that. And I love talking about this issue. The next thing that I want to do is really look at how we can develop tools to build that culture. If we just talk about culture, but we don't talk about how to do it, how to make it happen. And I think I saw some questions early on already kind of about that. I'm going to try and give you some things. These are things, admittedly, that we have done at San Diego Humane Society, or I have done at San Diego Humane Society, or at other organizations. But I can also talk about some other things as we go through that I think will be relevant from other places. And really looking to build a culture through all of this that will retain your staff and maximize your impact. And I would say I'm positively a steadfast believer that our organizational culture is what allows all of that to happen. If you have a bad culture, quite simply stated, your organization isn't optimized, your impact isn't optimized, and we work in a field that's far too important not to be amazing. So it seems that it should be all of our goals. So let's talk about it a little bit. Whenever I give a presentation, I usually start with a couple of assumptions, and I want to share a couple of those with you all now. So I've already kind of gotten into it in my original preamble here that my feeling on culture is that it's key to these things, to retention, morale, to productivity, and to your success. So I won't belabor this. You can just soak in that cute picture of a raccoon being bottle fed. A couple of my other assumptions are that no matter where you are in your professional career, no matter where your organization is in terms of its commitment or lack of commitment to organizational culture, we can all improve. And that's what this is about. So my hope is that folks will not just take one thing away, but at least a couple of ideas or a couple of aha moments to go, yeah, maybe we can do this, or maybe there's this thing that we used to do it, and let's sort of re-energize that and bring it to life. So we're all in very, very different places with this and creating whatever culture it is we want. And there's just zero question in my mind that we can all do more. So, in thinking about workplace culture, I've thought a lot about how our jobs impact our lives and how satisfaction in your position impacts your life. So this is a Harvard Business Review estimate of how many hours average adult works in our lives. 90,000 hours, basically a third of our life is spent at work. I would say that given this, just we owe it to ourselves to create a culture, to create a place that we want to be. If you're spending a third of your life at work, you may as well love it and find it to be amazing. And creating a culture that we want is, in fact, the key to being able to do that. So let's jump in now with what is organizational culture. What is it? What is this thing that I'm talking about? So I've got a couple of definitions that I want to go over with you. And I'm going to read parts of this, but I've also highlighted the parts of it that I think are really important. So when we look at this definition of culture, and I do think it's absolutely critical that when we talk about culture, we can talk about, we can say exactly what it is that we're looking for. If you're not doing that, if everybody's just kind of thinking, well, I think this is our culture, or I think that's our culture, what I can tell you is your teams are not aligned, or your team is not aligned. So when we think about culture, it's this set of rarely articulated and largely unconscious beliefs, values, norms, and assumptions that the organization makes about itself. It's the environment that you're in. And organizational culture consists of this set of unwritten rules that govern acceptable behavior within or even outside the organization. So to give an example of that, if you have folks that show up for meetings late, if you have people that come unprepared, disheveled, not ready to bring their best to that meeting, and that happens routinely. This could happen from organizational leadership. It could happen from folks not in leadership. But if that is the behavior of your teams, that is in fact your culture. And we'll talk more about what that looks like and how that sort of manifests itself in a little bit. But that's just an idea of what these unconscious, rarely articulated norms are about what our culture is. Another way to look at this is organizational culture is the set of values, beliefs, attitudes, systems, and rules that outline and influence employee behavior within your organization. Culture reflects how employees, customers, vendors, and stakeholders experience your organization and your brand. So this is, there are lots of ways that I like to think about this. It's if you went out and asked a guest at your shelter, what do you think of our organization? They're defining what your culture is. Are they going to say it looks professional, it looks well run, the people seem happy, they seem invested in the work that they're doing? Or are they going to see a group of dispirited, disaffected, disheveled employees that represent your culture to the public? So there are a multitude of ways that we can think about culture. And what I want to do by the end of this is get it that we have a real sense of how you can proactively work to change that. So this slide leads right into that. Organizational culture comes about in one of two ways. It's either decisively defined, nurtured, and protected, or typically it comes about haphazardly as a collective sum of beliefs. Either way, you will have a culture for better or worse. So here's my pitch to everyone today. To be explicit, to be purposeful, to be strategic in building a culture. So this slide has from the inception of your organization. I'm going to throw that part out and say, wherever you are right now, think about where you are on this continuum of building culture, about the clarity that your organization has around that culture, and think about what steps you're going to do, what actions you're going to take to build the culture that you and your team want, that your community, the animals, your staff deserve. So that's what this presentation is about how we can get there. What I'm going to do is just not have a discussion about this because it's a little bit harder to do in sort of this online forum, particularly from an airport. So think about this though, about what your organization can, or what organizations have a good culture that you can think about and what makes that culture, and think about how that differs or is the same as your organization. What are the things that you need to implement that would be able to build that? If you think of Southwest Airlines, for example, and you think it's because their employees seem happy. And I realize there are going to be some of you on this call that are like, last time I took a Southwest flight, those people didn't seem happy. I totally get that. But generally speaking, Southwest was known certainly for many, many years as this organization that was a very, very joyful place that people really enjoyed flying on. How did they do that? How did they get their employees to collectively be able to present that to the public? And how can you do the same? So we're going to take through some of that. So Elke, I wanted, I beat you to the punch a little bit on this because this is an AI image that I got from this on organizational culture isn't a single voice, it's a choir. And I do think it's important as we work through culture and talk about this, that this isn't just about your CEO, the president, executive director, whatever the leader is. Now, let me be clear, culture starts at the top. It's super, super important, but it is not the only thing that matters. Every single person on your team needs to feel empowered and engaged in building your culture. And if they don't, then I would argue that you're certainly not optimizing it. So this is a pretty wacky graphic. And quite honestly, I couldn't think of a better way to do this. I'm not going to tell you that I think this is the most beautiful or effective thing. But I want to share with you a couple of things that we're going to go through here, that when we also talk about organizational culture, there's not just one thing. This isn't just like, here's our culture, that's it. When we look at any organization, it is a complex mix of people, departments, and actions that the organization is taking. At San Diego Humane Society, we have created and built something called the SDHS Way, and I'm going to show you a definition for that later. And it essentially stands as a guidepost, a North Star for what our organizational culture is. That culture exists in a framework of a lot of other things that interact with it and overlap with it. So those are things like the core values that we have for our organization. And I'll share those with you just very quickly later on. You can see them. Uh, then we look at some of the teams that I manage. We've developed our own team core values as well that are different than the organizational core values because our team has its own culture. Within my teams, there are subcultures below that All of these are not supposed to be just off in their own world and not connected. So that's why we have this funky Venn diagram where there's overlap of these things. We also have two different other named cultures that we talk about at our organization. We talk about our culture of care, which is how we take care of our staff. And we talk about a culture of philanthropy, which is the role that every staff member has in engaging our public and ensuring that they can think favorably of us and in an ideal world want to be engaged philanthropically as a volunteer, et cetera, with us. All of these things are bouncing around and coexisting, hopefully in harmony, and singing as a choir in that sort of one collective voice for the greater good. That may not make that much sense for you at this moment. As I go through this presentation, hopefully it will coalesce into a little bit of a more coherent kind of diagram. So when we think about who's responsible for building organizational and team culture, it's again, it's not just the leader. It is everyone. The leader does need to set an example and create the conditions and the space for the culture to thrive. And by that, what I mean is to talk to your teams about what is our culture, what are our expectations, what are my expectations, and what are our expectations of each other. So we'll go through what that sort of looks like and how that works, but I can't stress enough how critical it is that everyone plays a role in building this culture. And if it's just coming from one leader, and I know one of the questions that was in the chat early on was, we've tried some stuff and it didn't work. And you're not alone in that. This happens all the time. So this is just a sort of a slide that I picked up that reinforces this. And it talks about change may be significantly better if it's driven from the top, but change can start anywhere in the organization. And again, it's really critical to recognize that leadership doesn't just come from the top down. Leadership moves sideways, leadership moves up, leadership moves in all directions. So does organizational culture. And we want to ensure that every employee feels that they have a role and they play a vital part in building this culture. So you do have to have this shared set of expectations and clarity around that as you move through it. So thinking about this, look, not everyone will play the same role. Your managers, your directors, your team leads absolutely need to be brought on board. They need to have tools. They need to be given an environment. They need to understand what it is they're looking to create. And this is going to come not by accident. This is going to come strategically by having conversations around this. At this point in time, I would say our staff can't go more than 2 weeks without hearing about the SDHS way in some fashion. Ideally, they're not going to go a week. Actually, no, let me take that back. They're not going to go a week without it because they're getting it put in communications they're receiving from various campus directors. They're getting it in team meetings that they're getting from their department heads. So they're not going to go a week without hearing about this cultural fit of ours. And we're then exploring in larger ways their role within it. So thinking about, do your managers, do your leaders, do your directors, number one, they're not going to all implement the culture in a homogeneous way. But you do need to provide them with a framework and a baseline for what this looks like, because they do, in fact, communicate. They are the role models. If your managers, directors, and on up the leadership chain are not living and exuding this culture, it will never work. So you do have to have it at the top, but everyone does play a part in this effort. So let me show you what the SDHS way is. So we've got a lot of words here. And what we look at for this is to guide the actions of everyone in the organization. So everyone who comes into San Diego Humane Society gets a presentation and new hire orientation on the SDHS way. So it's not possible that a new employee can say, I don't know what this is. I don't know what's expected of me. And I don't know that this is important to the organization. So we've basically looked at this. And the way that I've talked to our team about this is, it's not important to me that you memorize this. I have said that for anybody who gets an SDHS way tattoo, that I have certain San Diego Humane Society swag that I'll be able to give them. I've not had anybody take me up on that tattoo yet, but at some point maybe it'll happen. But in the meantime, what we're looking at is essentially setting standards. And so starting out, we're looking for a gold standard in meeting the needs of animals and the people who love them. And if we don't start with that to say, are you doing exemplary work? Are you phoning it in? We can't have that. So this is the expectation, is that you're going to be extraordinary in your job. It is our promise to our community that we're going to provide exceptional care and experiences for them. And this is another thing that basically empowers our team to make decisions, to be able to think about what is it that this guest needs? What is it that this person needs, so that we're not just a culture of no, that we look to find the yes. How can we support each individual person and each individual animal with the things that they need? And let me be clear, this is much easier said than done, but this is the idea where we want to look and say, if an individual person in our guest experience team has an interaction with a guest, that we can look at and say, that was good, but it wasn't great. This creates a method where there can be accountability to talk to them to say, hey, I saw that interaction. How do you think we might be able to improve upon that? Do you think that that met the SDHS way, the expectations that we have? So there are some really great accountability tools that are put in here also for team leads, managers, directors, and on up. But it's also important that when we talk about the SDHS way, we're not just talking about our guests and our animals. We're talking about how we work as individual team members. So this commitment extends to how we foster this culture of respect, collaboration, and belonging for every team member, and where every team member feels empowered to thrive. So what we've basically done is outlined that our commitment is to a gold standard in animal care and taking care of our guests. It is basically the same thing for each other, and it empowers all of us to make decisions that are creative, that are collaborative, that are designed to do exactly what it says here at the end, which is to build connections and a lasting impact. There's a lot of stuff out there about how you build trust individually. We all know, right? Trust builds slowly and then is eroded very quickly. We are all in a long-term relationship with our communities where we are seeking to build trust. If you can hit these standards, what you're going to have with your community is trust, respect, and appreciation, and greater involvement and engagement from them. I will stand by that. And so the SDHS way has existed, by the way, for at this point, I would say about 2 years or so. And so this isn't something that's been sort of established for 50 years. We are still in the process of evolving and adapting it. When we think about this, what we're really looking at is, again, here's just sort of another slide of what this is, right? So if you break this down into in simplest terms, for our animals, it means we're going to provide them with extraordinary care. For our guests, we're going to provide them with exceptional services that start with a smile, and our goal is to exceed their expectations. And I want to be like crystal clear, because we've had some feedback from staff on this. What this doesn't mean is we're expecting staff to take abuse from the public. It doesn't mean we're expecting them to work miracles. It means that we're expecting them to start with a smile, to start with positive assumptions, to work to exceed expectations, and to be there for our community. And for our staff, it's just our commitment to our culture of care, which is outlined in a host of other things. So that is what the SDHS way is. That is sort of, again, the North Star and the thing that guides our culture. But when we look at, again, those other sort of parts that comprise what culture is, we come back to things like our core values. So at San Diego Humane Society, these are our core values. But I think there are loads of organizations that put values on the wall, and then that's it. Okay, we came up, we went through some exercise, we put some core values up, and that's it. It's really important that your values don't just live on a wall, that you actually can talk about them. And to me, the SDHS way allows us to do that all of the time. So it's really a tool that activates this and brings our core values to life. When we think about culture, um, just inherent in culture. Culture isn't like math, where you can just learn math and, okay, I know it. And in a semester, I can take calculus and I can become pretty good at calculus. Culture takes a long time, but it's important to recognize that it is learned. Positive culture is learned, so too is negative culture. So which culture are you shaping and how are you doing it? But no matter what, it is going to take time. It's not, and I really stand by this line that's in here. If it were easy, everyone would already have it. And what I know, without doubt, and you all put this into the test. I hear it from our staff all the time. One of the things that's been great for me in this is hearing our staff when they come back to me and they'll talk to me about an experience they had at another organization. And this could be a car rental company, it could be an airline, it could be a hotel, a restaurant, where they'll say, wow, I went to such and such. And let me tell you what they don't do there, the SDHS way. So one of the things that you'll see in life when you start thinking about things in this way is it's really easy to identify when this is not happening. It's it's also really easy to identify when it is. And Just chew on that a little bit. It's going to take time. Don't expect miracles, but think about it also like this. Culture is what you allow to happen. So I want to sort of touch on this. There's another slide here. So culture is what you allow to happen, and the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior that the leader is willing to tolerate. So if you have proverbial bad apples, bad actors in your team, in your organization, and you allow them to do those behaviors. So if you have staff that are showing up late and unprepared for meetings, again, that's your culture. Culture is what you allow to happen. If you have staff and employees who you allow to treat other staff poorly, that is your culture. So think about what you need to do to change that culture. If you are a leader, a team leader, department head, organizational leader, what are the things you need to do? What are you allowing to happen that sets and defines your culture, and how are you communicating that to your teams? I think it's a really incredibly powerful example and something to consider as you chew on just what you're going to build, and to take a really hard look and a reflection on where are we as an organization. So really, really important just to kind of understand that as a theoretical concept. One of the other things is a lot of people come into animal welfare and our organizations because they love our cause. They feel a really strong connection to our mission. Just because of that, that does not mean, it doesn't mean a number of things. It doesn't mean that they're going to stay for very long. It does not mean that they're going to excel in their job. Their passion, as probably most of us know, can be run out of them. We all look and have to work with compassion fatigue. We know that we deal in an incredibly difficult industry. So people come for passion, but they will stay because you have an organizational culture that supports them, that is tangible to them, that is meaningful to them. If it is not, if they feel overworked, undervalued, underpaid, all of these things, which let me assure you is not the easiest thing to fix. And I will put no one under the illusion that everyone at San Diego's Humane Society doesn't feel one or any of those things. But we work really hard to ensure that they can know that those things are not correct, and how we try and pay our employees fairly, how we work to take care of them. And if you're not doing those things, what we're all going to end up with is a disaffected workforce, one that is not providing excellence, and one that either has just straight compassion fatigue or full on burnout and is not doing an extraordinary job for our community. So recognize that they'll come to you because they love what you do. They'll also do a poor job or leave if you don't have a great culture. And so I've spent the first half hour or so of this talking about why culture is so important. And as I've worked on this over the past many, many years at this point, I'm routinely stunned. And sure, look, you can find presentations and you can find articles that are going to be on corporate culture, but it really surprises me how rarely there's a true focus on organizational culture. There's rarely a very open dialogue that lasts, is consistent, and builds upon itself to build the workplace culture that you want. Again, so much of this comes about haphazardly. So think about that within your own organizations, and again, what you can do to sort of change some things. So now I'm going to share some stuff with you, and I'm going to go through this really quickly because it's largely self-evident. But why does culture matter? Culture matters. Here's another assumption of mine. Just a lot of people hate their work. I am 56 years old. I have dealt with a lot of professionals in lots of different fields. I believe that this isn't really an assumption. I think it's a statement of fact. A lot of people hate their work. And truly, a lot of people, even in animal welfare, hate their work. And that's heartbreaking because we work in this most amazing field. None of our staff should feel that way. We want them to love their work, even though it's hard. We want to be able to show them the positive side and the good things. So looking at it to say it's not an assumption, here's a lot of words on here that basically just say even nonprofit workers were especially unhappy in a workplace satisfaction survey into 2023, where scores dropped 10% in satisfaction of nonprofit workers. Burnout is a consistent there. Well over half of employees were experiencing at least moderate levels of burnout. Um, so you can find all kinds of statistics out there. They're going to talk about disengaged workforces, and you might be able to look at that and think, well, that wouldn't happen at my organization because we're mission driven and people really care about this. And that is not correct. I have this slide in here because I put this in a lot of my presentations. It's a really great quote and one that I draw on a lot, that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that has taken place. So when you think about those disaffected employees, when we think about culture, I want you to just to kind of come back and say, have you actually communicated to your teams? This is our culture. This is our expectation. If you haven't, you are probably under an illusion that you have a culture that doesn't exist. So think about solving this problem, this illusion that the communication has taken place, and also recognize that you're going to have to communicate it, not just one time, but over and over and over again, because what you're looking to build in this culture is a collection of habits. And habits aren't built overnight. Again, if they were, everyone would be a runner, a weightlifter, have a perfect diet, um, just be a perfect person. It takes a long time to build habits, and it takes a long time to break bad habits that all of our organizations have. So think about how you can view that as a communications issue and a challenge to the organization. I've got a couple of other things here that are just going to talk about, look, most of the global workforce is not engaged. 60% of employees don't even know what organizations are doing to increase engagement or to enhance their experience. 70% of how much a team is engaged is determined solely by the manager. So earlier I talked about how everyone plays a part in this, but some folks play a larger part. So yes, we have to recognize this. So when you're thinking about how you want to build this culture, you are going to build from the top down, and you have to get your entire management structure involved and engaged, because they are the people that are actually the ones that matter to your staff and employees. All of you likely know this and could say, if you have a terrible boss, your job sucks and you don't enjoy it. So thinking about how important the individual manager is in this endeavor is impossible to overstate that. So here are a couple of questions that I want you all not to answer right now, but I want you to chew on these and to think about them. Do you have this clearly defined culture? If you went out to your organization and you did a quiz, walk around the halls and say, what is our culture? And see what people say. If they, number one, can't spit an answer out that says, this is our culture, I know what it is, they don't know what it is. I can guarantee you to a person, what you're going to hear are disparate answers, people confused, and people just kind of wondering on it. And I know that because I did it at San Diego Humane Society before we created this method, and folks had no idea. So for you, can you succinctly describe what your culture is? Or is it going to be kind of this rambling set of ideals and kind of things that you hope or you think are going to exist? So think about how you can crystallize that and distill it down to something that can easily be sort of done in an elevator speech to your staff, and how you can get them all so that you can clearly define it. And then the question is, can everyone in your organization, staff, board, and volunteers name this culture? So we've done presentations to our volunteers on the SDHS way. We have done presentations to our board on the SDHS way to bring everyone at every level of the organization along and understanding what we are looking for in building this culture and what we're looking for in terms of the output that we're going to have on the other side of that. So think about those questions as you sort of either embark, continue to sort of journey along in your cultural explorations, but I think they're really, really critical. And another thing that I want to challenge everybody on is how self-aware you are, because it's possible that we've got a number of folks that are sitting on this call going, look, our culture is fantastic. We think it's really great. I have a couple of stats here. I read an article years ago that said 90% of parents think their children share more than other children. I would say there's a stunning lack of awareness that takes place in our own lives about ourselves, about kids. I also used to work at a law school. And 90% of those students that came into law school were absolutely dead set certain that they were going to be in the top 10% of their law school class. Now, both of these things are clearly statistically not possible. A lot of organizations think that they have positive cultures. I don't know if it's 90% and only 10 really do, but I do know that there are lots of managers, there are lots of leaders that think, no, we've got this. I've got this nailed. We've got a great culture. But if you asked their teams, they would not say the same thing. Don't allow that disconnect to happen in your organization, and make sure that you actually know what your teams are thinking, and you can do that. So again, coming back to some other questions, thinking about this, I've kind of already covered it. Is your culture, is it explicitly stated or is it implied? If it is only implied, think about what you might want to do to make it specific. What are the challenges that you have to get your entire teams bought in and embracing your culture? So these are a couple of things that, again, if we were sort of in a four-person conference or other things, they would be easier for us to discuss. I've got a very small amount of time, so I'm going to kind of keep going, but I want you to think about these just within your own organization. What are the norms at your organization? I've already talked about on time and prepared for meetings. Do your staff and your facilities, do they look professional? Do your staff and your teams treat everyone fairly, equally, and respectfully? And to think again about culture really being the worst behavior that you tolerate within your organization. These are your cultural norms, whether they are stated or not. So thinking about what happens, even breaking this down into teams, are you proactive in building this culture or are you reactive? Do you look for solutions or does your team provide excuses? These are all cultural elements. So if you have a set of managers that aren't providing solutions, they're just providing excuses about why work isn't getting done. This is your culture. How can you work to change that? What are the challenges that exist for you? How are you going to work to be able to reverse course on that and move that needle forward? Um, Here's another question that I want you all to think about. Talk to your own teams about this question. What are the challenges that we face in creating our ideal organizational or team culture? This can be both because I'm about to go into team culture and where this plays a role again in that sort of Venn diagram and the overlapping circles that we have. And that's what we're going to go to now. So we've got this big organizational culture that what we're trying to make is that it is explicit, it is easily defined, and it is understood by everyone in the organization, from staff to volunteers to board members. It's going to be palpable to your guests when they come in, and everyone's going to be able to see it and know what it is. But it is not the only culture that exists at your organization. As I said, these cultures, they overlap. Another thing about them is they do, in fact, change. This isn't just a static thing that just sits there like a statue and lives. It's going to evolve, it's going to build. It's not going to be perfect when you just start it out, but you will have multiple cultures. So I want to just talk a little bit about some of the things that I've done with, I oversee our philanthropy and communications team at San Diego Humane Society. We have mashed that up. We call it our FOMS team. The FOMS team has a very distinct culture that is very different than the culture of our medical team, of our humane law enforcement teams, and other things. But we've worked to, again, systematically and strategically build this culture. So everyone who joins our team gets two books. Today I Will Fly and Naked Mole Rats Get Dressed. You can see these are children's books. They take collectively about 5 minutes to read, but they have two incredibly important concepts that everyone who joins our team is told from the outset that these concepts are important for us, and we want everyone to bring them to work with them all the time. And quite simply, they are challenging assumptions, not doing things the way that they've always been done just because, and about setting aspirational goals and using teamwork and creativity to be able to achieve those goals. This is something that sets the tone for our team as well, where we are creating a workplace environment that says we take our work seriously, we have important concepts, but we can also have fun in doing it. So that's one distinct element of an individual team culture. The other thing that we do for this team is we develop every year a different theme for the year that we're going to work on. This year, this is our theme, Be Contagious, for the FOMS team. What that means is we are looking to be contagious with our positivity. We're looking to be contagious with our energy and to essentially be infectious and contagious with bringing joy to our workplace. So every team meeting that we have, we talk about how we are moving forward in that together, what that looks like, what that feels like. So we all have, again, a sense of where we are, where we're trying to go, and how we're going to get there that is reinforced throughout the year. We also then developed our own core values as a team that sit outside of the core values of our organization. They are here. There are a lot of words on this. We've got lots of things on here. But what these allow us to do, what the SDHS way allows us to do, because what I will argue very strongly is these sort of cultural documents and touch points that you build in are accountability tools. Every one of our supervisors, if someone is not acting in accord with accountability, respect, passion, joy, adaptability, excellence, and innovation, we can talk to them about, we created these core values together 2 years ago. We did a first version. We then, about 5 or 6 years ago, we created another version. This is the latest iteration of it. Everyone who joins our team is given these in advance of coming on our team. And we tell them very clearly, that we take this seriously. This isn't just a BS exercise. This is real. When you go through your evaluation, we're going to ask you, because everyone will bring these to life differently. How did you work in your job to show that you were adaptable, that you brought excellence to your position, that you were thinking innovatively? Joy. Everyone's going to bring this differently, but how did you bring joy to our workplace? How did you demonstrate and exude your passion? Those can be kind of combined. How do you show respect to your coworkers, and how have you sort of been accountable for the work that you do? We have our team visions below that about what we're looking for. This creates the expectation and the culture around our team. And then we also very clearly defined what we mean by what a high performing team member looks like. Again, it's a lot of words on here. This was a collaborative work document done by 32 people to come up with what this is. This is also the post-COVID version of this. There was a pre-COVID version of it that was different. This is our post-COVID version. I want to be really clear. None of these tools or ideas that I'm bringing up are meant to be perfect. What they're meant to do is to move the needle appreciably, to create an operating environment where everyone is operating under the same set of shared assumptions and expectations about what we are looking for, what our expectations are of each other, and why it is we're working to hold people accountable to those standards. Because when we think about this cultural thing, a lot of folks are just like, oh, like are your employees happy? And it's not just about creating happy employees. I would contend that creating a positive culture, happiness is just a byproduct of that. It's not necessarily to me the goal that I look at and think, well, I'm just trying to make staff happy. I'm not. And I routinely tell teams, I am not looking to make everyone here happy, because no, if you're trying to do that, you will fail, and you are only setting yourself up for, I don't even know, some type of water torture for yourself, because you'll never get there. What culture does is it sets and manages expectations. Culture should modify behaviors. It creates accountability, and it creates this environment where excellence can, in fact, breed and be sort of this hopefully sort of self-fulfilling prophecy that happens, and you get into a cycle of positive habits that are built, and you develop essentially high-performing teams that are making the biggest impact that you can possibly make on your community. And what I can assure you is, without an extraordinary organizational culture, you will never be able to have those things. It's just not possible. So these are some of the ways that we've gone about doing this at San Diego Humane Society and within some of the teams that I manage. It's extraordinarily important that, again, everyone on your team knows what this culture is, that everyone knows. This is one of the other things of talking to people directly. So whether this is going to be about the SDHS way, whether it's going to be about your own department team culture, to ask your team members, ask your staff, how are you helping to build our culture? Because everyone, every single person is either strengthening and building that culture, or they are weakening and eroding that culture. And I personally think that's a pretty powerful question to ask team members. Can you articulate to me how you are strengthening our team culture and our organization? If they can't, then I think there's room to think on that. You as a manager, you as a leader should be able to also talk to them about, here are some ways that we can do this. Here's the support that I'm going to provide. Here's how we're going to work to be able to do that together. But the other part of this is, if they can't do that, for them to think, if they are coming to work, again, disaffected, not committed to the organizational ideals, the team ideals that you've outlined, that you have articulated, that you have strategically put together, thoughtfully presented to them, then they are in fact tearing that culture down. They're weakening it, and they're keeping the organization and your team from excellence. So I have just a couple of questions that folks can also take and kind of chew on outside of this. This isn't meant to sort of be done immediately and wrapped up, but when you think about this, as you think through your culture, how do you personally, how do you define what a positive organizational or a team culture is? And if you're a leader in that culture, why are these traits important to you? For your team, why would this culture matter to them? And then to think, once you've sort of gone through that exercise, to ask yourself the next question of, have you actually communicated to your team this? Have you had conversations around it? This culture that was built at San Diego Humane Society and within this farm structure that I've outlined, didn't happen in a vacuum. That did come with a lot of team input, with a lot of conversations with other leaders throughout the organization. And then we had to come about, okay, how are we going to communicate this out? And the only thing that I will say on communications is you will think that you've communicated it effectively and you haven't come close. And let me be clear, we communicate about this a lot. And I am not going to tell you that it's enough. It's not. We have more work to be done on this. And to ensure that we have full organizational buy-in. We have a team of, 700 people at San Diego Humane Society to get them all acting in a homogeneous way, to have them all with a shared understanding and commitment to this is no easy feat. But a lot of work is going into it, and I think we've seen some very tangible and positive things that come from it. So just to kind of continue through this, as you think through this exercise, what are some of the adjectives you would use to define your team culture? What actions could you take to ensure your team would use those adjectives? So again, there's that shared thing. And what I'd say is we've just kind of outlined how to be able to do that. So you kind of have a cheat code on that. But I think those are kind of, it's an important theoretical exercise to be able to go to. Then the other thing is, we talked a little bit on your culture really being what you allow. So really taking a hard look. And this is where things can get hard. And I would say it's actually where the rubber meets the road on this. Do you have staff that are not aligned with your team culture? And if they're not, what are you doing to get them aligned? What are you doing to course correct them on the actions or the inaction that they take in the office place? Because your culture is the worst action that you allow to happen. Your other teams will know it. They will talk about it. They will be annoyed by it. It will impact their morale. It may impact their work output. So think long and hard about that. And then I've got a couple of questions down here for consideration to have with supervisors. So for the folks, if you manage multiple people, to think through, talk to them about what are the challenges they face in building their own team culture and how can you assist in overcoming those challenges. Look at and talk with them about what are the biggest opportunities they have to develop and strengthen that culture and to ensure that you are aligned in how you're going to optimize those results. You could go on and on in these questions and how you build this. What I want to leave everybody with is it's not going to happen by accident. I know you're busy. I know we are swamped. I know everyone is drowning in dogs. It is an exceedingly difficult time right now for virtually every animal shelter out there. But culture is absolutely critical to our collective ability to be there for the animals, to be there for our community when they need us, to have extraordinary employees who want to stay. We have fantastic people that enter this field and leave burned out and beaten down. Our ability to create the cultures that we want keeps that from happening, respects our profession, respects the animals, respects the people. So what I want to do is challenge everyone to take some time to think after this about how you're going to, wherever you are in this cultural continuum, to move the needle in an appreciable way forward. What are the conversations that you have to have with your teams? What are the questions you need to ask yourself, your other leaders in your organizations, and how are you going to be able to move that forward so that you can demonstrate 6 months from now, 10 months from now, you all have made an appreciable difference in that.